Today we're reading from Acts chapter 16, verses 11 through 15. If you remember from Saturday's reading, we talked about Paul and his team searching for the direction of God and then going on to Macedonia. Today we're going to pick that up as they journey on to Macedonia. Their journey would have taken them about 5 days from where they were. It would include a voyage across the Aegean Sea from what's now modern-day Turkey to modern-day Greece. Once they arrived at the port, Philippi, the city that they were journeying to, would be about an 8-mile distance inland. Let's pick it up in Acts chapter 16, beginning at verse 13. On the Sabbath, we went outside the city gate along the river where we thought there would be a place of prayer. We sat and spoke with the women who had gathered there. One of them, a woman named Lydia, a dealer in purple cloth, from the city of Thyatira, a worshiper of God, listened, and the Lord opened her heart to pay attention to what Paul was saying. After she and her household had been baptized, she offered us an invitation. If you consider me a believer in the Lord, come and stay at my home, and she prevailed on us. So Paul's typical pattern would be on a Sabbath day to go to a synagogue. Evidently, there weren't enough men, Jewish men in Philippi to have a synagogue, and so there were a group of women who would meet for a place of prayer, and so Paul and his team went there instead. And so he gathers with them in prayer, and while he's there, he begins to share the gospel with them. And one of them, a woman by the name of Lydia, begins to listen to Paul, and she believes and turns herself over to Christ. So Lydia is described as being a dealer in purple cloth, and her business must have been doing pretty well because she eventually invites Paul and his team to come and stay with her. She's also noted as a worshiper of God, which is a way of saying that she was a Gentile, but she worshiped with the Jews. She believed a lot of the things that the Jews did, but she hadn't actually converted to Judaism. While Paul is preaching, she's listening. Scripture says that God opened her heart to what Paul was saying. And it reminds us that it is God who is at work in us before we respond to him. It's God who puts grace into our hearts to listen and to hear, to obey, to believe the word before we actually make the decisions to do so. And then it notes that she and her household were baptized. And this is the first time that we see that designation in the book of Acts and really in the scriptures. In New Testament times, the culture was quite different from our modern American context. If the leader of the household did something, the entire household usually did it. It wasn't the individualistic response that we typically have today where someone, you could have a group of people and each one does what they personally believe. Wouldn't have typically been like that. And so Lydia, as the head of her household, because she believed, then the rest of the household follows suit. And so in a normal household context, that would include spouse, children, or any servants that were also part of the household. And this leads to an interesting question. And that question is, what about our households? Do they reflect Christ in our households? You might remember from Joshua 24:15 that Joshua said, "As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." And so do our households work that way? Are we serving the Lord in our households and with our households? One of the other things that I think this story brings up is the ministry of hospitality. Hospitality was something that was commonly done in the ancient world, but especially so among Christians. It was a sign of the love of Christ that Christians would open their homes to anyone, certainly other Christians, family or friends, but even strangers, even people they didn't know, they would welcome into their homes. Are our homes places where people can come and experience Christ? Obviously, in the current context, we're kind of being discouraged from inviting people into our homes. But under a normal context, what would that look like? And then going on from there, it's the people who bring the gospel that Lydia is showing the hospitality to them. What about the people who bring us the gospel, specifically our priests? Are they welcome guests in our homes? Are we making sure that they have all of the things that they need by contributing to the church so that they can be well supported? Let's be sure that our households are places where Jesus is Lord and God is glorified. Along with this, Let's also do all that we can to make our homes places that are warm and inviting, not only for family and friends, but also for strangers.